What is the problem? Well, whose fault is it? Is it the government for not encouraging enough homes to be built, or is it our own national obsession with owning our own homes?
Yeah, well, certainly what's underpinning the volatility in the UK housing market is a shortfall of homes, and that tends to mean that prices increase in real terms on any long-term basis. Clearly, levels of house building are a long way short of where they should be if you're going to have an even match between supply and demand. But there's some long-term structural issues in that. We have a housing market which is very heavily dependent on private house builders to deliver volume. We don't see anything like the level of social housing built that we would have done in decades when we reached the magic figure of 200 to 240,000 homes a year.
And that's what we still need these days. We've had a few messages on this. On Facebook, Richie Gray says just that. We need to build more council houses. Is that a solution?
Well, it's one solution. I think it's part of the solution. The difficulty with building council houses is where does the cash come from for that to be undertaken? In reality, we have constraints on availability and home ownership at one end, and for younger generations, real constraints on the availability of social housing. So what that's doing is putting a lot of pressure on the private rented sector. And if we're really going to develop a model where we are going to significantly increase levels of house building, we need to be building for that private rented sector, and we need to be building up an institutional investment model, and perhaps the government needs to put as much thought into that as it does into trying keeping alive that dream of home ownership.
The dream of home ownership, in fact, with council houses came from Margaret Thatcher giving people the right to buy in the 80s. With that in mind, are we just far too obsessed with owning our own homes? Should people be just happy to rent their whole lives, as they do seemingly happily enough in Germany and France and other continental countries?
Well, there are problems with renting through your entire life and certainly into retirement, because your housing costs in retirement can then be very significant. The great advantage of home ownership is that by the time you reach retirement, normally you've paid off your mortgage. I think what we're going to find in the future is a change in the model. People will enter home ownership much later. They'll probably have much more help from their parents or grandparents at the time they either enter the housing market or they need to take a step up.